Hello, friends. Happy Thursday. Welcome to today's live level up conversation. Whether you're tuning in live or joining me on replay, thanks so much for making the time. Let's get started.
Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun, award-winning financial pro. Get ready. Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Hi, friends. I'm Winnie, your host, an award winning financial pro, a Forbes and CNBC contributor, and CNBC council member. And we are live. Indeed, we are live on many different social media platforms. So thanks so much for making the time and joining us today. Let's start and talk about where the market and how the market's doing. In fact, I was actually all looking forward to telling you, oh, the market's doing great today. It's a great day on Thursday. But unfortunately, sort of taking a slight change here. The Dow is still up about 250 some points right now, but the Nasdaq has now turned negative, down 60 points. S&P 500 is also down, but only about 2.5 points, so not crazy. We've got about 45 minutes left to go on the financial market, so we'll see. We'll revisit again before the end of the show to see how that does and see if it improves a bit. But I want to talk about that. I mean, we did see the Dow obviously do very, very well this morning, S&P, Nasdaq as well. And what we're actually seeing is sort of a sign of a broadening rally, not only in technology, but also in the semiconductor sector. You're seeing some optimism. This is good. We want optimism, right? We don't want all bad news. We don't want to be concerned about what's happening tomorrow or the week after. But investors do seem to be sort of on a wait and see mode right now. Obviously, we're waiting to see Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's announcement mid September on interest rates. Now, a lot of us are thinking that a rate cut is upon us, but we'll see. We'll see, right? And of course, we see Joshua joining us on YouTube Live. Thank you so much, CrossX Fighter, for being here. Always a treat to have you with us. And of course, we're going to go in. We're going to talk about some big business news today. There's a lot of news. So you're going to definitely want to stay put until the last story because I've got a lot to share with you today. And a lot of it that's going to have an impact on, I think, many of you in your lives, one way or the other. Now, I want to kick it off with one story. And I know it's specific to California, but I want to share this with you because oftentimes what happens in one state will trickle down and continue on to other states. And this is kind of a big thing. This is being shared by The Verge. Wes Davis is sharing this story. California Assembly has now passed a big, this is definitely groundbreaking, a big bill on artificial intelligence, AI safety bill. This is dubbed SB 1047. Okay. Now, this is, of course, going to now it's the state Senate, and then it's going to go to Governor Gavin Newsom for final approval. But this is a big deal. This is sort of a pioneer AI safety bill aimed at regulating advanced AI models here in California. The bill mandates that companies that are conducting AI business that they have to implement shutdown mechanisms. They need to be able to shut down, when it's necessary, and they need to protect models from unsafe post-training modifications. And of course, they need to also test for catastrophic risks as well. Now, of course, there seems to be broad support by many on both sides of different parties. They're also emphasizing the importance of just to make sure that AI safety is there and we have some rules, regulations, and some understanding if this technology is planted to continue to evolve and develop into more companies, more industries here in the state of California. Now, there's going to be input, of course, from open source advocates and even companies like Anthropic of like, how do they feel about this? So now, of course, not everybody likes this idea. And you guessed it, some of the technology companies aren't so keen on this, including OpenAI, of course, Anthropic. And even some politicians are saying, well, this bill's focus on catastrophic harms could actually slow down and, you know, make some changes, I guess, to innovation that they think might not be a good thing, especially for smaller companies, smaller developers that really need a little bit more creative space, creative decision making there. But amendments have been taking place, and they've replaced some criminal penalties with civil ones. So that's a big one. And they've also limited the attorney general's enforcement powers. And they've also modified the requirements for the bill's board of frontier models, is what they're calling it. But of course, this has to have final approval in the state Senate here in California. And then Governor Newsom will need to sign. And until the end of September, he does have to sign, or he can veto the bill, which would then make it a crucial step for AI governance here in the United States. So let me know what you think about that. I actually think that there should be some sort of guidelines, but whether or not it needs to be a bill, whether or not there needs to be certain protections, that there needs to be penalties, and whether or not it's appropriate, that's really for you to decide. I'm curious to see how you think about that, but I want to make sure to put that on your radar because obviously we've been talking a lot about AI on this show and all of the positives of AI, but then we've also seen what can happen on the flip side. I mean, certainly many of you have heard about some of the cyber attacks that have been occurring in the last 2 months. We've talked a lot about them on this show. So let me know how you feel about that. If there should be some bumpers in place for artificial intelligence and whether you feel it should be on the state level or the federal level and everything in between. All right. Well, my next story is one, I don't know how big this is, but it's still interesting because, so often we hear about companies, we hear about layoffs, and so often you think of layoffs or companies closing or challenges being something that's more in tune with smaller companies, maybe mom and pop shops, maybe smaller entities, or just companies that are being, washed out because they're not innovating, not keeping up with the latest and greatest, right? Online shopping versus like the malls, which some malls, depending on what neighborhood you are, some malls have become even empty. Well, this one, I think some people are finding interesting because it's like, which category is it? Apple, believe it or not, is cutting some jobs or letting some people go across some of their apps, including the Books app and the News app. Now, this isn't completely new news. Obviously, we know that in the newsroom, like different publications, we know the LA Times, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, many publications, traditional publications, have had to let go employees. But sometimes you don't think that this would actually be necessary at a company that is like Apple, right? Well, in fact, there are. So job cuts are now going to be in digital services. Apple is laying off about 100 employees from its digital services group, and they're focusing mainly on Apple Books app, that app, and the related services to that. Now, most of these layoffs have impacted the team that have been behind Apple Books, with additional cuts taking place, believe it or not, in engineering as well as Apple News. The layoffs, they say, are sort of a shift in priorities within that division. Though Apple does assure everyone that updates and new features for the Books app, they're gonna still continue to be as planned. But nonetheless, this is part of Apple's broader focus and all in into digital services, which of course includes Apple TV Plus, Apple Music, and many other of their platforms. Now, historically, Apple has always been very cautious when it comes to letting people go. In fact, their recent cut of about 600 positions related to when they basically canceled their smart car, or new car technology and their smartwatch display projects. They decided to exit those industries, and so they let people go there. But CEO Tim Cook has said that these layoffs are really, and they should always be, as a last resort, indicating that the strategic nature of these decisions by Tim Cook and the Apple franchise, that it's really part of a broader downsizing, downscaling effort, and they really want to sort of move ahead. So the move sort of follows other layoffs that they've had in 2023 and earlier in 2024, signaling just an adjustment in sort of their operational focus. So if you're thinking that it only happens in certain companies and not other companies, in certain regions and not other regions, well, there you go. Even Apple does layoffs. All right, let's continue on. And this is another story that I really want to hear from you on this. And I want to know what you feel about this. And do you think this makes sense or doesn't make sense? Is this one of those unnecessary lawsuits? Well, Yelp, yes, is suing Google for what they say are antitrust violations. Now, of course, this follows the Department of Justice's very huge victory here. And this is being shared on The Verge by Lauren Feiner. Thank you so much for your contribution. Yelp has, in fact, filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google. They're saying that the tech giant continues to maintain this sort of stature of monopoly and local search services as well as search in general. And they're saying that compared to Yelp, they're just unfairly favoring its own services over competitors like Yelp. Because I mean, I'm sure when you Google a business or a restaurant or somewhere you plan to visit for the first time, you check with Google. And so some things you might go to Google, and Google does a great job with, listing photos, profile, hours of operations, and also a lot of reviews, as does Yelp. Now, of course, Yelp is claiming that Google's practice of directing users just to its own local search results in general search queries that they believe are illegal and harms competition because they're preventing rivals like Yelp from growing. So Yelp's decision to sue was, of course, influenced by the Department of Justice recent win and its antitrust case against Google, which they say is signaling a more favorable environment for such claims of competition, monopoly, and all that. So Google has, of course, dismissed Yelp's claims. They said this is absolutely not true, definitely not credible. And they're saying that similar allegations were previously rejected by the FTC already and the DOJ case. And of course, Google will make sure to defend itself in this case. But let's talk about the impact on consumers and, of course, advertisers on this too, because Yelp is saying that, well, these things that Google does, well, they lead to a reduced quality in the search results because you're only getting this vacuum of results, and that consumers want more choices. And it's also forcing local advertisers to really pay higher fees due to less competition. And they're saying with more competition, the consumer wins because they have different choices. So Yelp has been very, very vocal about these antitrust concerns with Google. They've had these for many, many years. They've been complaining about this. And then even previously testified before the Senate and even filed complaints in the European Union. So this is not just in the US here. So this lawsuit is now part of a broader trend of more scrutiny and more legal challenges against companies this size as Google is, in terms of their monopoly dominance in the search market and in technology in general. Let me know what you think about that. Do you prefer to use Google? Do you prefer to use Yelp? Is there one area that you feel is better than the other? You know, I actually prefer to use Yelp for restaurant reviews because I feel like the people who Yelp about restaurants tend to be a little bit more, hmm, maybe a little bit more detailed, and sometimes if it's really bad, they tend to do that. And I feel like Google is a little bit more everything's great and I love it and everything is wonderful. So I feel like that community that's a little bit more detail critical is, in terms of restaurants, is on Yelp. But and I did really like Google for a lot of other things. I love how they can tell you when places are closed. Sometimes they can tell you where places are busier and less busy. So I think like both of them can coexist in different ways. And you, as the consumer, as the end user, would then determine which one would be better. But I agree. I think it's important that we will have access and have easy access to both platforms, and people who aren't familiar with one or the other have access and know that there's different choices in it when it pertains to your choice of search. Okay, speaking of search and speaking of restaurants, here's another one I want to share with you. And this pertains to McDonald's. Now, we've been talking about McDonald's, we've been talking about food and all that stuff for a long, long time. But McDonald's, well, their value meals are coming back. Actually, if you haven't been to McDonald's in a while, like myself, I didn't even know they were gone. In fact, fast food chains now are really reviving these value meals because they say with rising costs, consumers like you and I are pushing back, saying things just cost too much. In fact, fast food giants like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, many other businesses are now reintroducing their value meals to try and bring in that budget conscious consumer. Let me just ask you, I mean, I feel like budget conscious is an interesting term. You know, I work with clients of all different age groups and financial backgrounds and demographics and asset levels and household values. And I would say by and large, I feel like it doesn't even matter if you make a healthy amount of income. My feeling is everybody I'm talking to now is becoming more budget conscious. Let me know if that's your impression as well. Do you feel that way as well? Do you feel much more budget conscious now than ever? I feel like I feel this way as well. So, nearly 80% of Americans, in fact, surveyed feel that fast food has become a luxury. 80%, leading to a reduction in dining out according to a recent survey. Now, so the revival of this whole value menu is response because people are just going out to restaurants less, and that includes fast food restaurants. Many chains are now competing to offer affordable options while still be able to attract customers to buy those regular price items. So this move is part of what analysts are calling sort of a value menu war. And we've seen this. If you've seen TikTok, YouTube, you'll see different creators create videos on how you can stretch your budget in terms of which restaurants to go to. And I even saw a video where they had people go buy like a fast food like plate from like Panda Express and divvying it up for multiple people in a family and whatnot. So this is definitely a thing. This like whole budget conscious thing is not something new, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon because I do think the cost of goods and eating out has been tremendously more expensive. Now, early results, of course, show that increased traffic for McDonald's is prompting the company to extend its value meal options because they know that this works. And they're predicting that more of these promotions, analysts are predicting, will continue because fast food chains are going to want to retain cost sensitive customers, which, as we can see from the survey, that's like the majority of Americans today. And speaking of like prices being reasonable and whatnot, this is another story that I saw this week that I want to put on your radar too, because this one I think is a no-no story. All right. This is about Kroger. Kroger, as you know, is a very large supermarket company and chain here in the United States. Well, believe it or not, one of their executives has admitted to price gouging yeah, during an antitrust trial. This is shared by Newsweek. Suzanne Blake, thanks so much for the contribution. During the antitrust trial, Kroger's senior director for pricing, Andy Groff, actually admitted that the company did raise prices on things that you and I need on a day to day basis, things like eggs and milk, that they were raised beyond inflation levels, which of course now people are not happy about. This is a big deal. This is controversy, right? Now, this admission comes as consumers, families, households all across the US continue to face sky high inflation, and they're just questioning the justification for companies pricing things the way that they are priced, making these price hikes during the pandemic. So many experts now are suggesting that this is more widespread than just groceries, but in many industries, you're going to see them in groceries, which is impact of food, which also impacts the cost of goods for restaurants, right? And hospitality, and everything costs more. And then you then have to pay employees more to also keep up with that inflation. So it's just aggravating a bigger problem. So this trial is part of a bigger FTC antitrust case concerning companies such as Kroger's proposed acquisition of another supermarket chain, Albertsons. That's a big one here on the West Coast. They're saying the concerns are that the merger could lead to now further increases in price due to reduced competition. Now that I feel like is a reasonable concern. So I'm curious to see how you feel about that. Do you feel like groceries in your neighborhood definitely grew much more than it should have during the early part of the pandemic and even right now? Or do you think, yeah, I can see that, but and how do you feel about that? Do you think grocery chains should be allowed to increase based on inflation and then tack out more? Or do you think there should be some sort of barrier on price gouging? I mean, that's sort of the premise behind companies such as warehouse stores, such as Costco and Sam's Club, right? There's sort of that understanding. There's a certain barrier that you know that they're not going to go beyond, and therefore, when you shop at places at that, you might feel that it's probably closer to what you're supposed to be paying. So, yeah. I know. I see a lot of comments coming in. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. So, yes, a Kroger spokesperson obviously said that, in this particular case, the legal team cherry picks certain comments and it's just not a good way to do it. And then, of course, there's going to be continued discussions on what's true, what's not true, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And then, of course, that's going to impact whether this merger does happen into the future. All right. Well, let me just continue on because we want to talk about what's right in front of us. In fact, starting tomorrow, some of you, many of you might even start getting on the road, getting on a plane because this weekend is Labor Day weekend. If you've been so busy that you actually forgot it was Labor Day weekend, you are not alone. Let me tell you, I've spoken to several people who literally forgot that it was Labor Day weekend. It's a little easier when you have kids because kids have the day off. But yeah, so for Labor Day weekend this year, this has been reported by CNN talking about how this weekend and just how busy it's going to be. So domestic travel now is up 9% compared to last year, and the TSA is expecting its busiest Labor Day on record. They plan to handle about 17 million passengers over this holiday weekend. Now, airfare for Labor Day weekend is actually, believe it or not, 5% lower than it was last year. And this is a good thing. Gas prices are down 13% from last year, which does help with travelers with their financial expenses, right? When it comes to a road trip or just a staycation or things like that. But experts advise that when you book flights, make sure when it comes to booking that you pay attention to a few things, especially since if you followed my story on Tuesday about the cyber attack that occurred even at the Seattle Tacoma airport, this is a real thing. And because of that, there's concerns that there could be disruptions when you're flying. These are some of the tips that I want to share with you. Okay. Whatever you do, if you can, if you're booking last minute or even in the future, try as much as you can book that direct flight. That will help mitigate so less no less potential of you getting stuck somewhere. And of course, if you can, try to avoid checking in bags. If you remember the story from the Seattle Tacoma cyber attack this week, well, one of the things that went down was the convenient luggage movement, right? And so what happened was employees then had to manually move luggage, and that definitely caused a lot of delays. And of course, you want to also take a look at travel insurance. Now, I know a lot of people don't buy travel insurance. I'm guilty of this as well. I will be honest with you. I haven't bought travel insurance that often, but nowadays with a lot of disruptions, and actually it just happened to a very good friend of mine. She booked a cruise. She paid off the cruise only to have something change, and now the penalty to that cruise is like over $1,500 because she didn't buy travel insurance. So of course now she wishes she did. She did, but some things like that, sometimes you can get hit pretty hard financially if you don't have the right insurance. But something for you to consider. Whatever makes sense for you, But yeah, you want to just make sure that you have a plan B and a plan C just in case of potential delays or cancellations. But they are saying that the busiest travel period will be today and tomorrow afternoon into the early evening. And in fact, they're saying if you want to avoid congestion, definitely try to stay away these two times. So today and tomorrow. Okay. Now, really popular destinations they're saying are, of course, Seattle is at the top of the list here in the United States. Orlando, of course, New York City, Alaska, also very, very popular, and international Rome, Vancouver, London, Paris, Dublin, also big, very popular choices. Now, despite record crowds, though, airlines and TSA, they said they're expected to manage to increase volume no problem, barring any major weather disruptions. And let's just put out there any other technical or cyber attack issues as well, which can cause problems as well. We didn't have to say that before. But given what's happened in the last year, I feel like we need to talk about that now. But yes, Labor Day is marking the end of sort of peak season. In fact, AAA, the automotive club, is saying that Alaska cruises are popular. And of course, now with less crowds, because a lot of kids are now back in school, this might be a good time to book things for 2025 as well. All right. Speaking of travel, speaking of Labor Day, I had to share this one and a shout out to Curtis Peak, my creative director, for putting this on my radar. Circle K, for those of you who need to fill up your tank, is going to be offering 40 cents off gas per gallon over Labor Day weekend in certain states. Okay, so some of those states are offering 40 cents off per gallon on Thursday. That's today in certain states. Now, that's going to include states such as here in California, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, parts of Texas as well. So you might want to just check it out. Maybe, if you want to do a quick search to see if your Circle K in your area is doing this. But 40 cents off a gallon all day. And all you need to do, I guess, is enter your phone number in the pump because you need to have your Circle K's Inner Circle Rewards program. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it's probably some app that you have to give them your information and then, yeah, then you can have a discount. But anyhow, yeah, so it is in many parts of the country and like it just depends. Some of it is for just certain hours. So you definitely want to check in your neighborhood to see if that's the case. And maybe other gas stations are doing it. I don't know, but this is the one that I know so far. But they're also doing discounts, I guess, on drinks. So they're saying if you go to Circle K, they're also offering 79-cent Polar Pop and Foster drinks. I'm not totally sure what those are. And Inner Circle members get them for 69 cents. So, and they're saying that the Polar Pop sales that occur today are going to help support in Texas the Greater Houston Disaster Alliance's Hurricane Recovery Fund, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so definitely check that out. Let me know if you do it and if it works out well. Hopefully it does. But the gas discount offer is really limited to, I guess, one use per customer with a maximum of 35 gallons per transaction, which I'm guessing isn't going to be a problem, right? Because aren't most cars under 35 gallons? But don't judge me. I don't know. I'm not a really big car person, so you'll have to let me know how that goes. All right, so the market's about to close in about 20 minutes, but I got some good news for you. It's currently all positive. The Dow is currently up 342 points. Nasdaq's up 8 points. Not terrible. S&P 500 is up 11 as well. So thank you so much for being a part of today's Level Up community. Please do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you can stay updated on all the latest content. And if you want to watch past full episodes of Level Up, definitely check out NASDAQ, Amazon Fire, Samsung, LG, Roku, and of course, check out my social media handles or where you're at right now because we have a lot of the shows sitting there as well. And of course, when you share the show, thank you so much for tagging at Winnie Sun. I see them. I so appreciate them. And of course, if you're doing a road trip, check out Yes Factor with Winnie Sun, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. With that, have a beautiful week. Have a safe and enjoyable and relaxing Labor Day weekend. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. Be well. Bye bye now.